Years slipped by quietly, the way time does when people stop counting. Claire was ambitious, career-driven, and deeply invested in a fast-paced social life. She loved Robert, but her world revolved around networking, appearances, and climbing the professional ladder. Robert, on the other hand, was still deeply committed to his children and his work, and he valued stability, family, and authenticity above all else. At first, Claire admired Robert's dedication, but over time, she began to resent the time and attention he gave to the twins and Grace. Dinners missed for school events, late nights spent helping with homework. Small things to him became points of contention. Claire lacked patience for the subtle, everyday work of building emotional connections. She expected love to be more visible, grand gestures, lavish vacations, constant affirmation. Robert's quieter, steady, supportive approach didn't match her expectations. He tried to bridge the gap, but the emotional intimacy they shared was surface level. When difficulties arose, financial stress, family challenges, work pressures, Claire would retreat into frustration rather than partnership, leaving Robert to navigate both the household and the children largely on his own. Renee had taught Robert about patience, humility, and the value of quiet care. Claire, though charming and intelligent, had a more transactional view of life. She judged success by status, wealth, and social recognition, whereas Robert prioritized personal growth, responsibility, and genuine connection. These differences, small at first, grew into constant friction. Claire wanted a life built on appearances and ambition. Robert wanted a home built on love and trust. The marriage lacked a foundation of honest, deep communication. Arguments escalated quickly, with Claire often shutting down emotionally or walking away. Robert, who was used to carefully observing and understanding people, like he did with Renee and the children, struggled to navigate her emotional withdrawal. Over time, resentment built on both sides. Robert's marriage to Claire lasted almost 4 years. To anyone on the outside, they were perfect. The successful architect and his poised, intelligent wife, attending galas and ribbon cuttings, smiling for photographs. But behind the composure, something had always been missing. Their lives ran parallel, not together. He designed houses full of light, while theirs felt dim. She wanted movement, travel, parties. He wanted quiet, stability, something like home. It was a Friday evening. The twins had a school play, Grace had a piano recital, and Robert had rearranged his work schedule to attend both. Claire, dressed in a designer outfit, was scrolling through her phone on the couch, clearly impatient. "I don't get it," she said finally, glancing at him. "You're missing the gallery opening tonight, for a bunch of kids' performances?" Robert exhaled slowly. "It's important to them, Claire. You know that." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Important? Robert, this is life. This is networking, making connections, advancing. You can't live in this suburban bubble forever." He felt a familiar pang, the same one he had tried to ignore for months. "I'm not living in a bubble. I'm raising my family." Claire rolled her eyes, standing up abruptly. "Raising a family isn't enough. There's more to life than just obligations. You're missing opportunities, Robert. You always do." Robert looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, stopped trying to placate her. He thought of Renee, quietly patient, teaching the twins, guiding Grace, managing a household without ever demanding recognition, and he understood what had been missing. "This isn't just about opportunities or obligations," he said quietly. "It's about priorities, about the people you care for. And I can't pretend that your life and mine, they're aligned." Claire's expression hardened. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying, I don't think we can keep doing this," he admitted, the words heavy but certain. "We want different things, Claire. I want a life with meaning, with love that's steady, with family. And you want something else. And that's okay. But it's not us." Claire looked away, silence stretching between them. There was no yelling, no dramatic scene, just the quiet understanding that their paths had diverged irreparably. That night, Robert went to the twins' play. He held their hands, laughed at Emma's over-the-top acting, and whispered encouragement to Liam backstage. And in that moment, he knew he had made the right choice. The divorce would follow quietly, amicably, but that evening marked the real end. The moment he chose his values, his siblings he considered his children, and the kind of life he wanted over appearances, ambition, and fleeting charm. And somewhere deep inside, he carried the memory of Renee, her quiet strength, her care, and the way she had always seen him and the children. As a standard of what family, love, and trust could truly be. Claire moved abroad. Robert stayed, this time not for ambition but because he was simply too tired to start over again somewhere else. The firm continued to thrive, but he found himself leaving early more often. He'd drive with no destination, windows down, letting the city rush past like static. Somewhere deep down, he realized success had given him everything except peace. After the divorce, Robert found himself navigating a life that was full, yet incomplete. He poured himself into his work, as he always had, but the emptiness at home was harder to ignore now. The children were growing. The twins were teenagers, full of energy, questions, and occasional rebellion. Grace had moved on to college, carving out her own world. Robert tried to be a good guardian, but it wasn't easy. He'd never been close to the kids in the same way Renee had. They loved him, of course. He was their brother, after all. But they had grown up accustomed to her quiet care. She had been the one who remembered the small details. What Liam liked for breakfast, which bedtime story helped Emma sleep, how to help Grace calm down when she was stressed. Without her, Robert realized just how much of their lives he had never truly noticed. At first, life was chaotic. The twins would wake up late for school, leave homework unfinished, and complain about meals he tried, and often failed, to prepare. He missed deadlines, not because of work, but because of trying to juggle schedules, school projects, and soccer practices. Slowly, though, he adjusted. He hired a housekeeper, competent but not familiar, not warm. He learned to cook simple meals and pack lunches. He attended parent-teacher meetings, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. The twins grumbled, but they respected the effort. And Grace became a bridge. She helped the younger ones with homework, reminded him of appointments, and even gently coached him on how to handle teenage moods without turning the house into chaos. Robert's relationship with the children deepened, but it was different from the bond he had shared with Renee. There were no easy laughs over spilled milk or whispered conversations at night. There was structure, discipline, love, but something quietly missing. He did his best to fill it, though the truth was never far from him. The house was orderly, the children cared for, but the warmth that Renee had always brought was gone. On weekends, he would take them out. The twins liked baseball, Grace preferred museums. And he tried to be present, really present. Over time, he became a steady hand, the kind of parent they could count on. The children thrived, and he felt proud. But at night, when the house was quiet, he often found himself thinking of Renee, how effortlessly she had kept the family together, how she had somehow balanced love, care, and strength without ever asking for anything in return. It was only years later, after the marriage with Claire ended and life slowed a little, that he realized the truth. He had been capable of keeping the children safe, guiding them, and loving them. But he had never truly been whole without her by his side. He thought about calling Renee sometimes, just to ask how she was, to hear her voice. But pride and uncertainty always stopped him. What would he say? That he missed her after all these years? That he finally understood what he'd walked away from? So he didn't, not until fate decided for him. Renee had launched a small interior consulting business. She rented a modest studio apartment in the city, filled with natural light, plants, and the faint smell of wood polish, a space that was entirely hers. She worked mostly with local families, helping them design homes that were warm and functional, the way she had always imagined homes should feel. Romance never came her way in a lasting sense. There were brief flutters, a client who admired her work, a colleague who asked her out for dinner, but nothing that truly resonated. Perhaps part of her heart still belonged to the boy who had once left, or perhaps she had simply chosen to channel her energy into independence rather than waiting for someone else. Either way, she never felt lonely. She had friends, her work, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing her designs come to life. Renee also kept a small connection to the children she had cared for, especially Grace. She would help Grace navigate college applications, offer advice, and occasionally babysit the twins when emergencies arose. The children respected her immensely, though she never allowed herself to step back into a motherly role in a way that blurred boundaries with Robert. She had learned the hard way that her worth wasn't defined by how indispensable she was to someone else, even if they had once been everything to her. Emotionally, Renee was steady. She had grown into her own person, confident and self-assured, with a quiet strength that didn't need acknowledgement. But beneath that calm, there remained a small, tender memory of Robert, the boy who had promised, left, and lingered quietly in the corners of her life. It wasn't pain anymore, it was a gentle echo, a part of her history that had shaped her without defining her. Her life was full, but when she heard of Robert's divorce, a fact mentioned casually by Grace one evening, she felt a subtle flicker of curiosity. She didn't hope, she didn't plan, she merely noticed, and sometimes when she passed familiar streets or a thought drifted to that long-ago summer, she wondered if life might allow their paths to cross again. Not for the sake of rekindled love, but to see him truly, finally, as he had become. It was a bright Saturday morning at the city's weekend market. A familiar place of open air, laughter, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee. Renee was arranging a display of handcrafted vases and small decor items in her studio's pop-up booth. Her hands moved with practiced ease, her mind focused on the smallest details. She had built this life meticulously. Every piece, every arrangement a reflection of her taste, her discipline, her independence. And yet, the bell over the market entrance chimed, and a tall figure stepped in, filling the space with a presence she hadn't expected to see again. Robert. He had aged, yes, matured. The boy who had once left so abruptly was now a man, measured in his movements, quiet but confident. He carried himself with the ease of someone who had faced the world alone and survived. His expression froze for a moment when their eyes met, a flicker of disbelief, recognition, and something unspoken passing between them. "Renee," he said, voice low, careful. "Robert," she said finally, her tone measured, polite, guarded. He took a step closer, as if drawn by the years that had separated them. It's been a long time." She swallowed, steadying herself. "Yes, it has." A pause. Around them, the market buzzed, but it felt distant. He was here, now, and yet, she couldn't let herself assume anything. She had learned that hope without caution could be dangerous. Divorced," he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "Things didn't work out with Claire." Her stomach tightened, and she looked away, arranging a vase that didn't need arranging. "I see," she said carefully, her voice even. She wasn't unkind. She simply didn't want to give away how much this news stirred something long buried. He followed her gaze. "Renee, can I walk with you? Just for a bit? To talk?" She hesitated, studying him. His eyes were earnest, sincere, different from the boy who had left abruptly years ago. She wanted to say yes, wanted to step toward the connection they had once shared. But she also wanted to protect herself. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "Okay, but just for a bit." They walked through the market, side by side, talking cautiously. He shared glimpses of his life. The children, the challenges of single parenthood, the divorce. She spoke of her studio, her small successes, her quiet independence. There were moments of laughter, memories of the past, and small silences filled with unspoken thoughts. Renee felt herself softening, but only slowly, only carefully. She couldn't yet forget the hurt, the abandonment, the years of longing she had kept to herself. Finally, they stopped near a fountain. He turned to her, hesitant, as if measuring the distance between them in both space and time. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said softly. I didn't know how to come back." She studied him, eyes cautious. "Life doesn't always give us the timing we want," she said, carefully measured. "But it does give us moments like this." He smiled, gently. "And now?" She hesitated again, searching his expression. Then, slowly, she allowed herself a small smile, not a surrender, not a promise, but a willingness to be present. "Now, we see each other again. That's enough for today." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. Their eyes met, lingering, filled with the weight of shared history and restrained emotion. It wasn't a promise of forever. It wasn't even a promise of tomorrow. It was, for the first time in years, a bridge. Tentative, cautious, but real. Between two people who had grown, survived, and learned the value of patience. And as they walked together through the market, side by side, Renee felt a quiet stirring. A spark she had long hidden, now allowed to flicker gently, on her own terms. After that first unexpected meeting, Robert and Renee didn't rush into anything. He didn't call every day, and she didn't immediately open her heart. Instead, they exchanged cautious texts, short phone calls, and occasional meetups, always public, always measured. Renee was careful. She had spent years building her independence and wasn't about to let old wounds dictate her choices. Every time she felt a flicker of hope, a small fear whispered, "What if he leaves again?" Robert, for his part, understood. He didn't press. He waited, quietly demonstrating that he had changed, that he had grown, that he could be trusted. He shared stories about the twins, Liam and Emma, their school achievements, their funny quirks, and the ways they were maturing. Renee listened, sometimes laughing, sometimes offering advice she had long since learned. She felt the familiar warmth of connection, but she remained guarded, refusing to let sentimentality cloud her judgment. The twins, now teenagers, noticed immediately when Renee began attending casual weekend dinners at Robert's home. They were hesitant at first, unsure of this new routine, but their memories of her care from years ago made it feel familiar. Liam would sneak glances, Emma would offer small smiles, and Grace, now a young adult herself, gave subtle nods of encouragement. Slowly, Renee's presence became natural. She helped with homework occasionally, cooked meals, and shared small moments of laughter with the children. She never intruded, never overstepped. She was there on her terms, quietly present. Robert watched her carefully, grateful for every gesture, every laugh, every subtle sign that she was letting him back into her life. He never took her patience for granted. He gave her space, but he was always reliable, always there. And then, one evening, something shifted. They were clearing the table after dinner, Liam making a joke that made Emma laugh so hard she nearly spilled her water. Renee laughed too, a full, genuine laugh. Robert reached out instinctively, brushing her hand lightly. Renee didn't pull away, but she didn't immediately respond either, a silent acknowledgement of her hesitancy. Yet in that moment, there was trust. Quiet, slow, patient trust that had been years in the making. Later, as they stepped outside together, Robert paused. "I know it's taken time," he said softly, "but I want you to know. I'm not going anywhere this time." Renee looked at him, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe him. Just enough to lean in and rest her forehead against his. A kiss wasn't needed yet. The small gesture, tentative and full of meaning, was enough. And in that careful, deliberate moment, they made an unspoken promise. Not a promise of perfection, not a promise of tomorrow, but a promise to take the time, to rebuild trust, to see each other fully, and to let their hearts reconnect at their own pace. The children, watching quietly from the doorway, exchanged knowing smiles. They had always remembered her care, and now, finally, they could see the warmth return to the person who had once held their family together. Years had passed, the seasons had changed, children had grown, and life had quietly stitched together what once had been broken. Renee's small interior consulting business had flourished. Her studio was now a bright, airy space with walls lined with designs, sketches, and the occasional trophy from a local design award. She had become confident, grounded, and content in her independence. Robert had advanced in his architectural career, his projects now recognized for both creativity and precision. But his greatest accomplishment, he realized every day, was not the buildings he designed. It was the family he had carefully nurtured. The twins were in college themselves, full of energy, ambition, and the subtle grace of children who had grown up with two people who loved them fiercely. Liam had taken after Robert's architectural mind, sketching buildings in his free time. Emma had Renee's eye for detail, arranging spaces and colors wherever she went. Grace, now an established young professional, often joked that she had grown up with two older siblings and two extra parents. Robert for structure, Renee for heart. Renee and Robert had learned patience. Their bond had been tested by years apart, by life's twists and turns, and by the careful hesitancy that Renee had insisted upon. But the result was stronger than either could have imagined. Was no longer tentative, it was natural. Love was no longer uncertain. It was lived in quiet gestures, shared laughter, and the small moments that defined family. One sunny afternoon, the entire household gathered in their backyard. The twins had returned from college for a break. Grace was showing off her new apartment plans. Renee and Robert leaned on the railing, watching the children, their hands brushing occasionally. Small, effortless touches that spoke volumes. "You know," Robert said softly, "I never thought we'd get here." "I never thought." Renee glanced at him, a small, teasing smile forming. "You mean you never thought we'd finally figure out how to work as a family?" He laughed, the sound warm and full. "That too. But this, all of this." He gestured toward the children, toward her, toward the home they had built together. Renee rested her head lightly on his shoulder. "We did it," she whispered. "Not alone, but together." Robert turned slightly, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Together," he repeated. The children, watching from nearby, smiled knowingly. They had always loved Renee, always respected Robert. But now, seeing the two of them side by side, steady, caring, fully present, they understood. This was home. And for the first time in years, Renee and Robert felt it fully, the warmth of a life repaired, the joy of a family united, and the quiet certainty that they had finally found the place they were always meant to be, not through accident or chance, but through patience, love, and the courage to stay. They didn't need grand gestures. They didn't need words to declare what had been built. Every glance, every smile, every small, shared moment was enough. And in that quiet, sunlit backyard, surrounded by the laughter of children and the comfort of love that had endured, they knew, finally, that they were home. It was a quiet evening at home. The sun had just begun its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The children were asleep upstairs, leaving the house peaceful and still, filled with the soft hum of life they had built together. Robert had been nervous all afternoon, a rare crack in his usually composed demeanor. He had planned this moment for weeks, but it still felt impossible to capture in words what he wanted to say. He found Renee in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketching ideas for a new interior design project. Her hair fell loosely around her face, and her concentration made her look like she had for years, focused, graceful, and completely herself. "Hey," he said softly, stepping closer. Renee looked up, smiling. "Hey, what's up?" He hesitated, then crouched down in front of her. I've been thinking a lot," he began, his voice low. "About us. About everything we've been through, and everything we've built together." Renee's smile softened, her pen pausing mid-sketch. "Okay." He took a deep breath and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, simple velvet box. Renee's eyes widened slightly, but she stayed quiet, letting him lead. "This isn't about a grand gesture," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate, understated ring. "It's about the life we've built, the family we've made, and the love that's been quietly growing for years. Renee, will you marry me?" For a moment, there was only silence. Renee's heart raced, a mixture of disbelief, joy, and something tender, the awareness of how far they had come. She could feel all the years of shared responsibility, laughter, tears, and small gestures in that one moment. "Yes," she whispered finally, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Of course, yes." Robert slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands gentle, reverent, as if holding something fragile and priceless. They leaned into each other, forehead to forehead, smiling through the quiet tears, and in that small living room, they felt the weight of years lift. No one else needed to witness it. The children, the house, the life they had built, all of it was theirs, and this moment was the promise of the rest of it. "I've waited a long time for this," he murmured. "So have I," she replied, her voice shaking with emotion. And as the sun set outside, casting golden light across the room, they held each other close, knowing that every challenge, every hesitation, and every year apart had led them exactly here, together, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives. On the wedding day, the afternoon sunlight filtered gently through the trees of the small garden where the ceremony was set. It wasn't grand or ostentatious, no cathedral, no extravagant hall, just a quiet, beautiful space that felt like home. It was the kind of place that spoke of simplicity, warmth, and care, much like the life Robert and Renee had built together. Renee stood at the edge of the garden, her bouquet simple yet elegant, her dress flowing and soft. Her heart raced, a mixture of nerves, joy, and disbelief at how far they had come. She glanced at the rows of family and friends, but it was the children she watched first, Liam, Emma, and Grace. Their smiles were wide, their eyes bright. They had been with her through years of patient rebuilding, and now they were part of this new chapter. Robert approached, dressed in a tailored but understated suit. He moved slowly, letting the moment sink in. When their eyes met, there was a quiet understanding of all they had endured, all they had waited for, all they had grown through. "Hey," he said softly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Renee returned the smile, her throat tight. "Hey." They walked toward each other, hands brushing, a spark of electricity in the contact that both made them pause for just a heartbeat. The children stepped aside, watching as the two people who had shaped so much of their world came together fully, finally, without fear. The officiant spoke gently, but even as the words were said, it felt almost unnecessary. Robert and Renee had said their vows countless times over the years, in quiet moments, small gestures, and shared struggles. Now they spoke them aloud, but with the same sincerity. "I promise to be here, to care, to support, to love, through the ordinary and extraordinary, through mistakes and triumphs, always, Renee said, her voice steady. And I promise to be patient, faithful, and present, Robert replied, to build a life with you and our family, to honor the trust you've always given me, and to never let go. The children cheered softly, Liam holding Emma's hand, Grace wiping away a small tear. And then, when the officiant asked them to seal their vows, Robert leaned in and kissed Renee, a kiss full of all the years of longing, all the trust rebuilt, all the quiet, steadfast love that had brought them to this moment. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't loud, it was perfect. As they turned to face their family, hands intertwined, the garden seemed to glow around them. The twins ran to hug them, Grace joined in, and laughter filled the air. Friends and family clapped, but the real celebration was the life they had patiently nurtured together, the family, the home, the bond that had endured everything. Later, as the sun dipped low and golden light spilled across the garden, Robert whispered into Renee's ear, "We made it." Finally. Renee rested her head on his shoulder, smiling, a little teary. Finally, she echoed, the word carrying the weight of years, patience, and hope fulfilled. And in that simple, radiant moment, surrounded by laughter, love, and family, they both knew this was the beginning of the rest of their lives, together, fully, and forever. Thank you for watching. He scorned her. Please subscribe for more stories. Stories will be posted monthly, so please hit the notification bell.